I'll teach you everything you need to know about functions in 5 minutes. As we looked at in the last video, methods are functions that are attached to objects, but we can also make regular functions that aren't attached to anything. But what in the world even is a function? A function can basically be described as a group of instructions. First, we have to define the instructions, and this is like a blueprint. We're just telling the function what it does, and then we call it. That's like actually making the building. I'll show you how to define a function first. To define a function, we can just write function and then write the name of the function. In this case, we can name it fun. Short for function, not fun. You're not having fun here, we're learning. And then you follow by 2 parentheses. And then we press enter to end the block. The name can be whatever you want. I just named it fun, but it should be in camel case, like variable names. And speaking of variables, you can also make it local, and this works the same way as a local variable. You can only use it in the same block that it's in. You can't use it outside of that block. Let's change this function's name to change the part, in which the function changes some properties of the part. Let's make it change some properties like workspace.part.color equals color3.new, I don't know, 0.24, 0.77, 0.12. That is very green. Let's make it 0.92. Actually, no. Let's make it 0.65 red. Okay, that's more interesting. Make workspace.part.transparency equal to 0.1. Let's make workspace.name equal to you just got changed. And now, when we run this, nothing happens. Because remember how I told you this is just like the blueprint. Nothing's actually built when you make a blueprint. This is just telling it, hey, when we call this, this is what I want you to do. But we haven't called it yet. So to call it, you just have to write the name of it. And the name is right here. If you forgot, it's in this fancy little yellow color. So now we actually called it. Whoops, workspace.part.name. And let's see if it happens. And now look, it works. It changed the color. It changed the transparency. It's barely noticeable. Oh, I see it. And it changed the name to you just got changed. And then you can call this as many times as you want. You can call it whenever you want. You can put in a loop and call it, if statement and call it. But in this particular case, it's not going to change much because after we set the color and transparency and name to that, it's already going to be set to that, even if we call it again. So it's not really doing much. These parentheses are just for fun. I think the easiest way to explain this is to show you an example. If I make a function called print this with an x inside the parentheses, we can then later make the x whatever we want. For example, if I hit print x, and now when I call the function print this, instead of putting x, we can type subscribe. And I'll show you what happens when I do this. Subscribe. It prints out subscribe. The reason this is called a parameter, and the reason we put this is like a placeholder when we don't know what is going to be printed. We want to decide what's printed when we call it. When we're defining the function, we don't know what x is going to be yet. It could be anything. So it's just a little placeholder for now. And then when we finally get around to calling the function, we can write whatever we want in here. It's basically as if the x gets replaced with whatever we write in here. And we could use this in our previous example by writing part in here and changing all this to part. For example, let's assume we have many parts in here. Let's say we have part A, part B, and part C in here. We don't know which part we want to change while we're writing this, but then once we call it, we want to change workspace.part B. Part B has it coming. So when we call it, we specify, hey, we want to call part B, and this basically just replaces this with workspace.part B, if that makes sense. So now when we run it, bam, it changes part B. The benefit of doing this is before how we had it, workspace.part, what if we wanted to change a different part? We have to change it here and here and here. But with the new method like this, we only have to change it one time when we call it. And now instead of changing part B, it's going to change part C. See that? See that. You could also have more than one parameter. For example, if we have x and y, and we want a function that adds those two numbers that we put into it, we can print x plus y. We don't know what x plus y are going to be, so we're just going to have that as placeholders. And then when we call it, we decide, maybe I want to add 21 and I want to add 17 together. So now the function is going to add 21, 17.